Hello, guys. All right, this is a talk I've done one time before, and it ran really fast. So for a 25-minute talk, we ought to be okay because they gave me 45 minutes. So impact of testing on a DevOps pipeline, easy enough. I'm Bob Fornal. I'm easy enough to find. I didn't put my links on my deck. I will soon because they seem very popular. But let's start with what is DevOps. Pretty straightforward to me because I work with it all day long. Okay, developer operations is a combination. So it's a way for us to get our code out eventually to production, plain and simple. Okay, as you see here, it's an infinite loop because this is something we do over and over and over again, right? In a perfect world, this is the way it works. This separates that throw it over the wall. I'm working with a company right now that has an IT department, and when I'm going to get it to production, guess what? I got to schedule a meeting with these guys, and they got to come on, and my code goes in, and they got to click a button. And 10 minutes later, my code's in production. Then we go take a look at it to make sure it's working right. That's throwing it over the wall, right? Somebody else is controlling getting it there. DevOps kind of takes that away normally if it's done right. Okay, so a lot of things I'm talking about here aren't normal day-to-day operations at some companies, but there are companies where this works very, very smoothly. Okay, in the mix of this, we'll talk about something like what is Agile. Okay, how many have heard about Agile? Okay, know what it is in depth? Couple. Okay, I'm reasonable at it. You know, my Scrum Master is very, very good at it. Those kind of folks, they love this stuff. They love playing with this stuff, right? What is it? It's a way of focusing people and working on things and talking to people. And it really does work well when you're allowed to let it work well, right? When you're given that environment. But the same is said for DevOps as well, okay? But getting more into the meat of what we're going to talk about here is what is continuous testing. Okay, so we talk about continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD, right? DevOps, these nice little short terms. We like our short terms. But continuous testing is testing throughout that life cycle. And I can see the edge of my deck is a little off there, but I'm not going to fix that now, okay? But continuous testing is about that responsibility to create something of quality, right? To create something that you're comfortable releasing. Right? One of the first companies I worked with, continuous testing was not something we did. Continuous testing was, I gave the code to my boss. How far can I walk over here? All right. Whoa, let me get back in the camera. There we go. Okay. I'm going to walk this way, not that way. Got it. At this company, release was I zipped up the code and I gave it to my boss and he FTP'd it up to the server and then he hopped on his computer and he poked at it and said, this works right or this doesn't. No, I don't know about you, but I don't count that as continuous testing. Okay? When I talked about possibly writing unit tests, I go, we don't have time for that. Okay. I left the job after 6 years because I spent 85% of my time, I calculated this, fixing bugs in code I'd written in the last 6 years. Okay, frustrating. I don't want to look at the same code. I want to write new stuff. I want to create things, build things, right? Not tweak a little pixel. Tweaking a little pixel is fine when you're getting that release out the door, okay? Continuous testing was the next job I had where I wrote a scripting language, okay? And I wrote it. I got it working. I mean, this is mirrored something running on a mainframe. It was really kind of cool to do. But it's 180,000 lines code. It was really bad, 180,000 lines code. And I said, I need to test this. I need to rewrite it and test it properly. And amazingly, I found out I'm at the right company, Leading Edge. It's where I work there in Columbus, Ohio. Most of you have probably never heard of the company, and that's fine. But one of the owners of the company said, okay, whatever you need to do, that's the right thing. Immediately knew I was at the right place, right? So I rebuilt this thing. I put tests against it, and I was comfortable pushing 180,000 lines of code first time into production. I was comfortable demoing that for the CEO of the company just before we released it. It went the first year and a half and had 3 reported bugs. 2 of those were missed requirements. So 1 bug in 18 months. Properly tested code. Okay, yes, it's worth applause. It really is. Okay, so continuous testing adds to that because there's more to it than just that unit test, integration test, and things like that. We're talking about DevOps. Continuous testing. What does this mean in DevOps? Okay, early detection of defects. When I write unit tests, okay, we have this nice new thing that came out recently called TypeScript, right? What does it do? It highlights things you might have problems with in your code. That probably knocks out about half the problems you're going to have right off the bat before you have them. That's cool. Still leaves 50%. When I'm writing tests, what I've found over time, and I track numbers on this stuff, is that I'm capturing probably 9 out of the 10 bugs that would normally get to production. Just when I write my unit test. I'm writing a unit test going, hey, I should get this as a result. This is what I expect. And I run it and it fails because that code doesn't do exactly what I expected it to do. It's a little off in one scenario. Tweak the code, right? Rerun it, make sure it's doing what I expect it to do. Check that test again, okay? Faster release cycles, right? How many of you sat on a release where you had to revert it back, right? Yeah, okay. Let's be honest, they suck, right? I was sat on one the other day. It took us 3 hours to back one out. Okay, getting it in there was fine. It took us 15 minutes. Getting it out was a whole different story. I was the release manager on that one. I wasn't the one that wrote the code, thankfully. Okay, improved collaboration. Developers, operations working together, not isolated in these little castles. Okay, enhanced test coverage, not just the unit test, integration test, end-to-end test, QA tests. I mean, this is the test pyramid. How many have seen the test pyramid, right? Well, a couple. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's not hard to find, okay? Test pyramids, cool stuff. Some of the strategies. Agile testing development, to automate as many manual processes as possible. I have one right now that we're debating. Do we put it in a pipeline? Okay, I've got a website. We push that website up, the same one we had to revert back out. We had to revert back out 5 sites. My question was, did we have to? Because we found a flaw on one page, we reverted out all 5 pushes to production. So what I did was I said, okay, Mike was the one that found this flaw. I'm going to write an automated tool to do what Mike did, only I want to do it on about, I don't know, 100 pages. Right? We got cool QA tools you could do this with. Our QA was like screaming at me and has been for 3 weeks because I wrote something that's QA related. We'll figure that one out when we get there, right? But here's what happened. The next 2 releases, I captured all my screenshots of what it looked like before we released on about 200 pages. And within 16 seconds after the release, I had all the screenshots of what it looked like now. And Playwright said, hey, this is what they look like right next to each other. Here's the ones that had differences. And I manually went in and I said, okay, that's a difference we can accept. That's a difference. I mean, some of them were just really, really minor, like 1 or 2 pixel tweaks. But there were a couple where like the header changed. I said, hey, look, the header changed. And I slid it across. I showed them what it was. And business goes, that's expected. Part of this was changing the header. Okay. So the next 20 times I saw changing the header, I was okay with that, right? So we automated what was manual prior. Okay. Equal responsibility for quality and success on the project. Okay. I am as responsible as that QA in doing that. I saw somewhere we can improve. She's welcome to take over the code. Okay with that too. Okay. Whole team, including developers, testers, operations. Everybody needs to test. Everybody's responsible for that, right? I probably shouldn't be QA testing my code. Shouldn't be. Depends on the scenario. I mean, if all of our QA are out sick the same day, okay, maybe. Rather not do that, but we'll figure it out. Testing is done continuously. Here's the interesting one. Early, often, and after it gets into production. It's amazing how often that one gets missed. Okay? You want to do it early, you want to do it often. So when I'm testing when I push into dev, I'm testing when I push into QA, I'm testing when I push into UAT, over and over and over again. All those layers get run each time. Okay, and then it hits production. So your odds of having a flaw when you get there are significantly lower. Okay. Implementation, shift left, testing. You're shifting left, you're pushing it earlier, closer to when the code is written. Okay, when I wrote that scripting language, when I tested that scripting language, it was integration tests as well, because I needed to know that this part of the scripting language and this part work together, right? I didn't want to wait till QA was testing it to find out they work together. Every time I had a flaw in the system, I was building unit tests, integration tests over and over and over again, layers of these. Okay, continuous development, continuous integration. This is the pipeline stuff that we normally talk about. Okay, there are pros to continuous testing, quick feedback, fast delivery, handling risks. We've talked about a lot of that multiple times here. Here's the fun one. What are the cons? Okay, the cons of continuous testing. Netflix, what do? Anybody heard how Netflix gets code into production? Okay, they go through all of this. They've got a beautiful CI/CD pipeline. And when they release code to production, 90% of us are getting normal code. There's a small 10% that gets potentially buggy code, right? Have you ever had Netflix glitch on you? You're probably in that 10% at that point, right? And what they do is they give it out to 10% and it might run for an hour, maybe 10 minutes. I don't know what the window is. But if it's successful and they're not getting reported errors, they stage it up to 20. They go through a wait time again and they then stage it up and stage it up and stage it up. So if it has a problem, it stages all the way back to 0. This is automated. There's no human being touching that saying, oh, we're ready to move to the next level, right? If it starts having problems, if users are reporting problems, they back it out automatically, right? So bugs in production. Is it possible to get bugs in production with continuous integration, continuous delivery? Yes, it's possible. Okay, and they tend to be the harder ones to find. Okay, loss of customers. Hey, if you're in that 10% window and Netflix glitched really badly while you're watching, I don't know, a boxing match recently, right? That they had some real problems with. Do you think they lost a few customers? Yeah, okay. That kind of a release cycle, potentially, if that bug gets there, could lose customers. Tech limitations. Okay, your organization has to be able to support more of an infrastructure, has to be more comfortable with supporting that, okay? But you have to have that tech ability to do it too. It takes time to build that up. You know, I'll be honest, I'm not gonna sit down and build what Netflix has built, right? I mean, that probably took an entire team of engineers, probably months, if not years, to put all that together. They're probably still tweaking it today. Budget constraints, right? The organization I work with, we have about 70 people that work at Leading Edge. We don't have enough money to build what Netflix built. Flat out, we don't have that budget, okay? Where should it be done? Well, where does it occur? It occurs where, well, everywhere, right? Here and here and here and here. Yeah, I forgot that's a funny slide. Okay.
They're on their 20th plan. You're not saying the test and release. No, man, that doesn't sound right.
Honestly, it's probably my mistake. Yeah, I had the original in an image. I'll go fix that one. A bug in my image, yes. So thank you for finding that. This is only the second time I've done this one, so perfect. Thank you. All right, where are we? Okay. So I had a question come up when I gave this last talk that stopped me in my tracks. Okay, I put this whole talk together. We're all excited about talking in front of this group of DevOps folks new to the industry in Columbus, Ohio. I got a room probably about twice the number of people in this one. I mean, young people really eager for this stuff. And this hand pops up and goes, well, how do you test the pipeline? And that stopped me because I work in pipelines all day long. I mean, it's a significant portion of what I do in my day-to-day processes. But I never thought about that. And testing in the pipeline. Right now I'm working with Azure, and I know AWS has it, and I believe Google has it, but you can lint your Terraform, your file that you're using, your YAML, whatever it is. You know, so linting, just like you do with your code, checking your syntax to make sure it's right. You can run a pre-test. I can run this in a way that just tests. Is it going to bomb out and fail on something as I try and push it to production or push it into, let's say, the dev environment? So I can pre-test it, okay? It still fails a lot of times when I push it up there because there are environmental differences between my machine and theirs. It works on my machine a lot, okay? There are automated tools. I have not gotten a chance to test those because it's only been about 2 months since I gave this talk the first time. But I hear really good things about them. I want to test things like, does my API actually respond the way I expect it to without having to go back and run my sanity checks? I've got about 3 or 4 sanity checks that I can run real quick to tell if everything's spun up correctly. I need to automate those. This one simple question got me realizing I missed a part of this, right? We should be testing everything. Integration is not necessarily just software to software within that little piece of code you're writing in that front end application or back end, right? It could be between this system and this system. The current one I'm working on, I've got an application in Azure that reaches out to the API endpoint of Cloudflare and changes things. I need some type of test between there to make sure that works the way I expect it to, right? That's a different layer of integration, okay? You talk about Netflix. 2008, they had database corruption. They couldn't ship DVDs, this is 2008, for 3 days. Who knew they started with hard physical CDs, DVDs? All right, good part of the crowd, awesome. Last crowd, they stared at me. Okay, these were like high school or college students. They stared at me. It's like, oh yeah, they used to ship DVDs, right? I mean, and you ship it back, and it was a very small charge. It was really cool. Well, because of that database corruption, they couldn't ship for 3 days. Okay, their migration to AWS to doing what they do today took them 7 years. Okay, that's a big deal, right? They wanted to be prepared for any unforeseen errors, which is where you see this up here, where we talk about, what could cause the worst damage. When they had the whole boxing thing recently, I guarantee you, they're going back and looking at how they test things. Okay, they've got Chaos Monkey, the Simian Army. They've got these things. Think about what a monkey would do coming in and playing with your code, right? He's gonna batter the living daylights out of it. Yes.
Are these actual terms?
Absolutely, yes. This is what they use. Yes. They have software out there that intentionally breaks things to see how their system responds. And if it doesn't respond correctly, it reverts that break and tells somebody, hey, you got to go fix something over here. It didn't respond correctly. It didn't fail correctly. Okay, respond to that failure. Testing methodology. Shift left talked about that earlier in the software lifecycle. The earlier you can get the testing in, I guarantee you, the better. If you're not doing testing now, you should be. Okay, if you need someone to help you advocate with that company, I've done it with folks I've met with at conferences before. We get together, we chat about what they're doing, and if they need me to come in and talk to a team, to a manager, whoever, I've done that too, to help folks out. Testing is a high priority, and I'm actually known in Columbus for being the non-QA tester that comes into I help run the QA conference out there. Okay, shifting right testing. We have to do it at the end of that life cycle when the code is getting out there into the production environment, right? User testing, performance testing, fail tolerance, fault tolerance. Blah, I wrote that wrong. I have FAILT. How's that in my notes? Functionality. Okay, we need smoke testing, critical paths. Okay, if you haven't heard of what smoke testing is, unit and component level testing. Okay, small scale stress tests. More on the methodologies, integration messages testing, collaboration over scenarios, performance testing, overall solution, functional testing, experience versus expectation, right? I expect users to use my code a certain way. I guarantee you they're going to use it differently, right? We have to try and predict that if we can, and if we can't, add it to it once you realize what that experience is, okay? Regression testing. Do we have stable performance, functionality, dependencies over time? Okay, that's where it gets really interesting, because how do you capture states of this throughout? User acceptance testing, real world situations by a subset of real users. That's when you find out, oh, I'm missing some tests because they do things I didn't expect. Okay, they scare me on that. Sorry?
Regression testing.
Regression testing. Did I spell it wrong?
Yes.
Regressed. Wow. Okay. Awesome. We're 2 for 2 today. All right.
User acceptance testing right now.
User acceptance testing. I love it, guys. All right. Best practices. Test early, test often. Eliminate risk with CI/CD. Quick feedback on quality. Reduce opportunity for new errors. Okay. Pair testing programming is something I throw into here because this tests, challenges in our automation when you're pair programming. Okay, it allows us to transfer knowledge efficiently, and it puts you in that scenario of testing versus analyzing. Right, it breaks down those roles in a way that you can look at the code differently. Okay, and pair programming, pair coding, and testing breaks down communication barriers. Okay, I work quite often with other seniors, with mids, with juniors. We have an hour blocked every day at the organization I'm currently with, and I've done it at others, where we hop in as a group and we might just tackle one problem for that day. Some of the guys might drop off, some stay on. I guarantee you there's almost always two in there. So somebody's learning something from the other, or somebody's looking at it going, hey, you're writing this code, but that doesn't make sense because what's over here. And I hadn't even looked at that because I was focused on what I'm writing. Okay. So best practices. Okay. So this QR is my slide deck, PDF form. Okay. So all those screenshots, you got better screenshots now. If you're smart enough and you look at that URL that has the actual URL that my slide deck runs on, so you have access to all the presentations I have. Okay. Any questions? We have, 4 minutes? Yes, we have a question.
Yeah. It's about, you have shown us all this spectrum of tools, practices, and
Yes.
that kind of thing that we should do. How don't feel overwhelming? I am QA tester, I do automation, but right now there is a lot of tools and be here, be there. How don't feel overwhelming about that? How should I continue on my path growing as QA?
The mentality between QA and developers is different. That's the first thing you need to realize. How many are QA? Oh, good number. All right. I'm assuming the rest are devs at some level. How many are management? Let's ask that question. Okay, a couple. So a couple non-devs in the room. Developers build things. We create things. We like to see things come to life. Testers, QA, what I've found now is it's not an every time thing. They like to figure out how things work by breaking it, by ripping it apart, right? That's a different mentality. Realizing that, I think, is helpful as you look at, like, how do I continue? How do I work with those folks? That different mentality puts a stress in place, right? I mean, it's almost an immediate stress. It's really hard not to. You get a new dev on the team and you QA something they're done, and you can almost guarantee they're going to get stressed out about it, right? It's hard not to as a developer. You wrote this, you created this is your code. It's hard to get away from that. And I switch companies quite frequently, so I get that a lot. And that's where sometimes the pairing comes in. That communication's a critical piece as you do that. So what I try to get my QA folks to do is, rather than just marking it on the card or sending me a note, give me a call. I mean, we're virtual these days, right? Give me a call. Let's sit down and see what the problem is and talk through what to do about it. Do we mark it on the card? Do we create a new card? Do we, get that relationship there? Okay. In terms of QA within this, the role in there is probably one of the more straightforward ones that we have in most cases. But you make the team more resilient by passing on some of your skill set and your tooling that can be used to those devs. Hey, here's the script that I use to test your A/B tests, right? I have code that actually creates A/B tests. So they can go to one link and it redirects to other pages. And our tester has this script that she shared with me. So before I release to production, I can run that in my local environment and make sure things are working, right? Which is really cool for me. And in those few times that she might not be there, I can walk somebody else through so that I'm not the one testing my own code, right? In terms of how that role is in there, most developers, and actually what I found, especially with the mids and juniors, is most don't know what a smoke test is, what the purpose for it is, how the manual testing fits in after that, what UAT should be doing. It's amazing how many UAT don't know. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Other QAs, did I miss anything in there? Close?
No, it's about,
how does QA progress within this kind of a scenario, I guess, within the talk? How does that fit into, like, career progression? Did I get close enough?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. There was a question over here. Yes.
Do you have any advice or suggestions for when you might come into, like, a legacy code base where the testing isn't there? So making a
Pray.
change is like,
Pray. No. This is the last question I got time for. The question was, if you come into a legacy code base, there are no tests, what do you do? Okay. You need tests. Okay, the worst case scenario I've seen with that is a company that has 97% of the money going through the organizations through one class. That one class is one function within the class, and it's 6,000 lines long.
I'm sorry.
And they're going, how do we test this? There's one team dedicated to managing that one file. Okay, and this is a company that does billions in a year. All right, so what I told them is, anytime you modify code, let's pull it out. Those 2 or 3 lines that you change, pull it out into another class, test those. Over time, and they're about 80% there after 2 years, you'll have it tested. Test what you change, would be my suggestion there. Build it slowly. Make sense? Always leave your code better than when you started. Okay? We are 1 minute over, guys. Thank you.